What's up, guys? I'm James Bainey, and I'm here with Kyle Larson, and we are getting ready to do a review and spoiler-filled book discussion on The Rise of Skywalker. Stick around. All right, this is it, man. Everything has been leading to this.
Yes, it has. Lots of roads.
It feels like, in a way, this is the book of books. It does it not?
Yes, in a lot of ways. I mean, this was a book people that loved the movie and people that were disappointed by the movie were both looking forward to and hoping that there would be a bit of expansion on some ideas and maybe some things that we liked more about the movie that, and things that maybe people didn't like about the movie. So I was really looking forward to this book and kind of experiencing this final story in the Skywalker saga from a different perspective, specifically Rae Carson.
So that's the big thing here too, is that since we normally do book discussions on books that don't already have some sort of other canon version of it, right? It's normally something separate. We'll usually discuss things like, where do we think it's going? How do we think this will tie into other properties? But clearly, this is just the movie is the movie, right? So 95% of this book, you probably already know the story of, with maybe a few little differences on how it was like worded or maybe described, like you were saying, by Rae Carson. So what we're going to do with this particular book discussion is, when reading the books, we went through and marked down every difference or extended scene, what's different in the book than the movie. And we're just going to run through all of those in chronological order. And we thought that would be good for you guys to hear if you aren't reading the book, or if you really want to hear the discussion on the differences or the add-ons for the novelization from the movie. So before we get too into that, I do want to read a couple stats on the book. So again, just like normal, we're reading from The Rise of Skywalker. It was released March 18th, 2020, written by Rae Carson and read by Mark Thompson, who always does an amazing job with all the different voices.
Love Mark Thompson.
Yep. Published by Del Rey and Random House Audio for the audiobook. And the timeline is, of course, during The Rise of Skywalker. So let's get into our initial thoughts and score on this one. And this is like score in my score is based on how I think it compares to the movie, in the sense of like, is this book worth the read? How did you take your score?
I kind of approached it the same way as you, because I was one of the folks who was a bit disappointed in the film, and that's a whole other episode for itself. So I just kind of looked at it as, what did Rae Carson do taking this story from the screen to the novel? And I thought she did a very good job. So I gave it a 7.5 out of 10 for my rating.
Okay. I went higher than you. I went into the 9s.
Oh, wow.
I'll just say a flat 9. Because, like you were saying, you said you weren't as big of a fan of the film. And I liked the film, but I do feel like this makes me so massively understand it and so massively more appreciative of the story that is there. That in a weird way, and I understand the film should have been able to convey some of these ideas, but it didn't. And the book does convey those ideas. So now that I know the answers and I know the solutions, or I know the meaning behind those things, I feel like the movie has more weight for me now, even though it itself, it's kind of like a sum of the parts kind of thing.
Yes.
And I think that it almost makes the book like necessary reading. It's just, it's really good in my opinion.
I agree. And on that note, for sure, I highly recommend to people who may have been disappointed by the film, when you feel ready, this book it definitely helped clarify some things for me. I still have some problems with the story, but for what Rae Carson did to bring in and expand on some things that I had hoped I would see in the film, I think she did a great job. There's some things I wasn't crazy about that she did, but for the most part, I really did enjoy her. She's an excellent writer. The reason I kind of gave it a, B- score is just, there's certain things in the story that still just kind of like snap me back. But I'm not going to hate on it. I think, she had a kind of an impossible job, and she executed it very well. So the only reason it's not a higher score is just simply because of the story. So,
yep. One more thing to mention too is that about the appreciation factor is we actually just did a video that was released a few days ago, me and John and Lacey on the Resistance broadcast, that highlighted the Skywalker legacy that came with the digital copy. Now, you may or may not have seen that because you might be holding off for the physical copy. If you want to go check that out, I think the theme of us talking for a long time about that documentary was the appreciation that went into the movie and how many people were working on it. It's just so crazy how many people get involved, and it really helps grow your appreciation for what they did with this episode 9. So go check that out if you want to check that out.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and I just watched the film again this morning after reading the book, finishing the book yesterday. And there are some very beautiful moments in the film. I'm not a hater at all. There's definitely, you can tell a lot of people worked really hard on that film. So I'm, would never denigrate that or criticize that for sure.
All right. So what we did here, I mentioned earlier, we created this list. I just did a countdown, and we have 50 changes. I don't want to say changes. That's not the right word. 50 differences, additions, longer scenes, kind of things that were cut maybe from the movie, maybe a deleted scene or something like that. However you want to phrase it, we've got 50 things ready to go, and we're going to just run right through them in chronological order. And the first thing on the list is that the book, in fact, starts with Rey. It does not start with Kylo Ren like the movie does. What were your thoughts on that?
I like that so much better because that was the opening of the film was so jarring for me. That was one of the things that really just kind of rocked me from the beginning. And this kind of opening with, Rey and Leia, having this conversation and kind of finding out where both of them are at after this, really traumatic year between The Last Jedi and the start of this film, where they're really just kind of, Leia's trying to train Rey and pass on her knowledge, and Rey's trying to figure out whether she's, a part of the Resistance or the Jedi, and just, there's a great amount of conversation in there that was obviously impossible for them to include in the film, but I'm grateful that we got that for the character Leia, and then that's, considered canon now.
Yeah, and it definitely does play out in the movie. You see Kylo Ren on this planet, and he talks to the Emperor. And then it just kind of says like a meanwhile, you know what I mean? That's how it feels here too. It's like she's meditating and she's going through all these things, and then it just kind of says that she is ready to fight against Kylo Ren, and it goes into where he's at, and that's him landing on Exegol and going through the whole process of what we see in the movie. So I thought it was interesting. It threw me off like right away. I was like, oh, I know where we're going with this at last, and it's like Rey sat there on the bed, and I'm like, what is Rey? This
totally.
We're already I'm writing things down, And in this section too, another thing was that Rey was told about Leia's lightsaber, and it was explained by Leia to Rey about how she had created this lightsaber, and that she stopped, and how it was maybe someday somebody will pick up that lightsaber and finish my journey, which we get in the movie later. But in the canon story, it was Leia telling Rey that, and then Luke just like conveys it later.
Yeah.
Like reiterates that, like, yeah, that's true. She told me that too, which
I much prefer.
I thought was really cool. Yeah. It wasn't a secret.
Yes, exactly. I like that too. And I like that, right away, because it's, you don't really know if you're ever going to see that in the film until the, the very end when she's on Octu talking to Luke. I never expected, I had avoided all the spoilers, and so I never expected to see Leia with a lightsaber or anything like that. And so it was nice to hear that from the character rather than, kind of this quasi like flashback scene that was, to me, it was kind of a little bit jarring. Like I didn't really know what was going on for a second. So I'm glad that we have that there.
Well, speaking of the flashback scene in the novelization, we get a longer kind of version of that scene from Leia's perspective. So she's thinking back to these days where she used to train with Luke, and there's this back and forth of Luke trying to like push her and nudge her, and she's like, that doesn't work for me. Like I need this other thing to make this work. And it was really good that the novelization went into a little bit more of the history between her and her brother and working together to move forward in the Force. Her specifically, he was kind of her master, and the novelization expands on that.
Yeah, I like the fact that, her lineage as a Skywalker is really acknowledged in this book a lot more than it was. We all knew it in the last two films, or excuse me, the last three films. But this book really brings that part of her, especially the part, and I might be jumping ahead here, where she kind of breaks down her name, the different names. Yeah, sorry.
I have that written down.
Yeah, okay, we'll talk about that in a second. But I really do appreciate the fact that they brought her kind of into the Skywalker story more, because she's always kind of been on the peripheral a bit at least in terms of the Force and the Jedi stuff. But now we know that she was training, she was doing all this stuff. And I thought that was a really cool addition to her character and that character's legacy as well. And especially since she's finishing Rey's training. And that's such a monumental thing for the galaxy at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next thing isn't really a surprise, because we actually got this particular passage on StarWars.com. And so the next thing was the Hux and Pride were on Mustafar with Kylo Ren. When they released that, I thought, well, it was really cool to know that they were just on the ridge watching this whole thing happen. Again, it's one of those things where it's like, well, I would have liked to see it in the film, but I didn't want a 3.5 hour film. So what do we cut? And it's like, it's not really particularly important that we know they were there, but it's cool that the novelization expands on the way that each of those characters look at Kylo Ren, with Hux saying like, I kind of hate this guy, and Pride being like, look at how beautiful he is, like the Sith, the dark side of him. So Pride really respects him, and I think that's cool. And then obviously we'll get into like the Oracle stuff, but thoughts on Hux and Pride?
Oh man, there's one thing I really loved about this novel. It's what she kind of did with Hux's through line and his arc in this, because you find out like he's been pretty sneakily planning on trying to, at least rattle Kylo Ren, to ultimately have him overthrow. And I love how this scene clearly puts the divide between Hux and Pride, as Pride is this, very loyal. He's kind of what we all thought Hux was in the beginning. And since Hux has had this experience of, being tossed around like a rag doll in The Last Jedi and basically becoming this lackey of the First Order when he thought he was going to be the ruler one day, it sets up that arc really, really nice. So it's not such a because I remember when I saw that in the film and you find out Hux is a spy, which is actually one moment I really enjoyed in the film. But it's still, you're like, wait, where, I was the same as like when Poe's like, what? That was my reaction too. So I thought that this was kind of cool that she set this up, kind of set this in motion. So when you get there, it's a little more logical, it makes a little more sense.
Yep. Yeah, I like all that. I like, there's a lot of inner thoughts that isn't worth really a point specifically, but there's a lot of inner thoughts throughout the novelization of his understanding of the whole, no matter what, I don't really care if the Resistance win. I want Kylo Ren to lose, which that's in the movie. But again, this novel expands on that. Like every time you're hearing his thoughts, it's just a reinforcement of how much he hates that guy, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's like, it's not even his first order. It's not even his empire anymore. It's just really about trying to take out this man that he just can't not stand.
For sure.
Another big one, man, because why this was cut from the movie. I mean, everybody, this was Rumorville, Leakville, all over the place. The Oracle, as the character was referred to on Reddit, you know, but it does exist. It is in the novelization, and the official name of this character is the Eye of Webbish Bog, which I was like, listening to the audiobook, I'm like, what was that? What did you just say? So I was glad that you had a written copy of it to actually write out what that was.
That would have been really hard on the audiobook, I imagine.
Yeah, again, you know, this was part of the same article that was released on StarWars.com, so you've probably already read it. But yeah, it was interesting, right? It's the baby head, it's the spider. The voice, as done on the audiobook, which I know you haven't heard, Kyle, but it's really weird, interesting voice. So that's cool to dive into. But what a cool character, and in a weird way, another just almost maybe missed opportunity to see like how weird Star Wars can be, right?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, kind of, you know, in a two-part response to that is that I think, yeah, that would have been a great thing because it kind of establishes the connection to Vader, and it would have been a great way to establish like, oh, holy crap, he's on Mustafar, where his grandfather, where this, you know, this whole kind of descent into the darkness of the galaxy began, and this whole conflated idea that he has about who Anakin Skywalker was and who Darth Vader was. You know, this seemed like to me when I found out that was Mustafar after I'd seen the film, that was a huge moment that they could have underscored. And I think, you know, again, we didn't want like a 4-hour movie, but I don't think having this Bog character in here or Oracle would have taken away, you know, maybe would have added like 2 or 3 minutes to the film. And I think it would have done a lot to show how huge it was that Kylo had gone back to Vader's castle, which everybody has loved since it showed up in Rogue One, and, you know, has really gone above or been expanded upon in the comic books, and then Vader Immortal as well. So I think that would have been a huge canon boon to throw folks who'd invested, you know, so much into learning about that realm, and when it just kind of showed up like a blip in the film, but here it's substantial. So I appreciated that.
I definitely do think that there was a miss thing here with understanding that he's on Mustafar. Now, again, after the fact, people talk about it. It's in the visual dictionary and stuff. People get it. But you almost do feel like, you know, you show the planet. The movie starts with showing the outside of the planet, right? And then like one bigger like helicopter shot of like the ground and Vader's castle off in the distance, and you'd be like, I know exactly where we are. And then you see him wrecking shop. You're like, boom, that established it. You know, I already get it where he went to go get this relic. It's not just on a random planet somewhere off in the galaxy. But the book as a whole definitely drives home the fact that 2 wayfinders were made, one for the master and one for the apprentice. The one in the Emperor's vault is clearly the Emperor's, and the ones that was on Vader's castle on Mustafar was clearly Darth Vader's. And it really drives home this fact that there's a reason that Kylo Ren goes to get his grandfather's, and there's a reason that Rey inevitably goes to get her grandfather's. You know,
that's a great point.
It's there, and it's just, in a way, it's like you watch the movie now after knowing it, and you go, oh, whoa, that's cool. But
totally.
like, and it's there. That's the story that they told in the Rise of Skywalker, but it takes the novelization to kind of open that up a little bit, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that was one thing I kept forgetting how many wayfinders there were when I remember I think the second time in the film, I was trying to pay more attention to that. And I kept kind of losing track of how these things even related to the overall plot. And I think, like what you said, Carson did a great job of, you know, spelling them out and also specifying them, and making sure that Rey is drawn to the Palpatine one, and Kylo is drawn to the Skywalker Vader one. So
all right. the Albrecht is the alchemist character who rebuilds Kylo Ren's helmet. There is a scene about this, a little bit more into like the ritual of it. What were your thoughts on this Albrecht character?
I thought that was fascinating because, you know, you get a glimpse. I didn't realize until I watched again this morning that Kylo's actually standing there and the Knights of Ren are standing there watching this person work. But, you know, having this introduction about what he does and you know, forging this and how they had to, you know, go to what was Snoke's ship or Snoke's boudoir, the giant Super Star Destroyer. And they had to go and actually find this and how hard it was to reforge this mask. So I really enjoyed that. You know, the more kind of Force stuff that they had in there was a boon for me. And I thought that it was really telling how, you know, I think this was a way that Kylo was trying to, you know, you get the sense in this novel, he's running so hard for the darkness here because he can feel this conflict within him continue to grow, knowing that Rey's out there. And so this is one big leap towards that. He's shepherded all these pieces from the wreckage of the, you know, Star Destroyer on Crate, from the Holdo maneuver. He's got them here. He's got the Sith alchemist working on it. And yeah, it's just another interesting layer to his journey, to the character's journey.
Absolutely. So the next thing we got is Poe talking to Aftab Akbar and refers to him as Junior. You say it is in the movie. Okay. Sorry. So
when I watched it this morning, I was actually wearing my AirPods because I have an Apple TV. So I was like, I want to, you know, get the full experience. And it's barely there. It's right after he kind of has that blowout with Rey and Finn about, you know, hyper skipping the Falcon or whatever. And and then he just turns around and he's like, "Hey, Junior," you know, and you kind of hear this exchange but it's barely in the background. Would really have to pay attention to catch it.
Yeah. So if you weren't paying attention in the novel, it's a little bit more clear because it's black and white. It's right in front of you.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, we have a brief scene between Rey and Rose, and they make a couple. They talk a little bit about why Rose is deciding to stay back.
Yeah. So basically, it's that Leia asked her to stay back, and you know she's kind of not necessarily. She's basically researching all the old Imperial designs that they're suspecting that the Sith fleet was modeled after, if I'm correct. And that's one thing. I just put that in my notes, but I couldn't remember what exactly they talked about. But I always love more Rose. So, and I thought it was a missed opportunity that they never really interacted on screen at all with Rey and Rose, because, you know, they had been through something pretty significant together with the Battle of Crate, and I had hoped to see maybe more of a friendship, and definitely I wanted more Rose in The Rise of Skywalker in general. So I'm glad that, you know, she got a little bit more time here in this novelization as well.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think if any listeners have ever read any of the novelizations of you know, Rogue One or Force Awakens or anything like that, sometimes there are just these scenes that you're like, oh, that's a quick like 3 or 4 sentences or something like that that's added in here, and it's not even necessarily that there's a whole lot of weight to it. We're going to talk about one scene, and then we have like a couple more where it's just like a little bit of an extended between this character and this character, or this one and this one, you know. But sometimes there isn't a whole lot that is there. We just want to make mention that, you know, while in the story, or at least written in the script or something along those lines, there is a conversation that happens between Rey and Rose, and they do actually show that they are closer. They're just as close as some of the other relationships that the characters have, you know. Finn and Rose are really close, and Poe and Rey are really close. You know, it's just like she's in the mix.
Yeah, they do, and I thought Rey did a good job of highlighting those bonds between the different characters too. Yep.
So then the next scene that is in the novelization that's added is Bulia's death scene. It is confirmed in the book that Kylo Ren is the one who kills him. And this scene basically highlights him just being brought on board and him being presented, and they're like, this is the guy. And Kylo Ren, just out of rage, just doesn't want to listen to anything he has to say.
Yeah, it's pretty, that whole scene with him getting his head cut off, and then, you know, the whole meeting about the Sith fleet and choking out which was in the film. Yeah, that's always, you know, very intense. I can kind of see why maybe this wouldn't be surprised if this was filmed, but I could kind of see why maybe they're like, maybe let's back off that. We've already got a lot in this scene. But yeah, it was interesting to see that.
I think a PG-13 movie could have absolutely done that. I mean, they cut off Jango Fett and Count Dooku and stuff like that. They cut off their heads as well. I would see it as him being like, you know, he's getting ready to swipe, and then they like cut to boom, it landing on the table, you know? Yeah. I think more so the fact that they showed his decapitated head and, you know, blood and stuff running out from under it. I mean, it's like not red blood, it's PG-13 blood, but it's still like, I think that's worse than implying that his head was cut off. They show it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, for sure. Yeah.
So just like I was hinting at before, some of the characters that also have lengthened conversations in this are Maz Kanata having a discussion with Rey about her journey that she's getting ready to go on, and saying like, hey, you know, last time we talked, or not, I don't know necessarily that, but it's like, you know, we had this thing in Force Awakens when I met you, we went on this path, and then here you are now, go meet your destiny, go on in your future. And then a similar conversation, or an extended conversation, that Rey then goes and talks to Leia. So we see more of that conversation as well. Any thoughts on the conversation with Maz versus the conversation with Leia? What do you thought?
No, I mean, not too much. Like the Maz thing, it was nice. You know, I thought her character in the film and in the novel, you know, just kind of popped up and served as this like wise steward, and kind of was in the right place at the right time when she needed to be. So, but I'm glad that she was there to kind of send Rey off on her journey, since she was somebody who basically introduced her to this in a way, you know, and handing her Luke Skywalker. And, you know, that was a big awakening moment for her. And, you know, I'll take more Leia and Rey any time. I'm glad that, you know, again, they were super limited with what they could do in the film. So I'm glad that that Rae Carson took the time to flesh out that relationship a bit more and add a lot more depth, and that these two characters over the course of the last year have really come to know one another. And they're both recognizing the fragility of where they're at. You know, Leia's at the end of her life, clearly, and she knows that. And I'm sure we'll talk about that more in the book. Is she's very aware that her health is failing, and Rey is at this breaking point, this kind of do or die point. So I think that they're finding solidarity within each other and within this bond that they've forged through Leia training her is really special. So I'm glad that, you know, there's more time, or more face time between the two of them.
Speaking of Rey, another scene that they added to this was Rey learning to force heal from the Jedi text, which seems pretty straightforward, but it's nice to get it in writing. Pun. But it also clarifies that whatever technique she used on how to force heal was also the technique she used to heal the broken Skywalker kyber crystal that went into her lightsaber. So this is an interesting piece here. What were your thoughts on this?
I thought this was huge. I mean, I know that this is probably something they couldn't have included in the film because it would have taken kind of a detour. But I thought that this was really cool to learn that kyber crystals can be healed, because as far as we know, you know, they either exist as they are, or they, you know, fall into a Sith's hand and, you know, they bleed the kyber, as we just saw in the Rise of Kylo Ren comic, and we've seen it in the Vader comic, you know, which is a really violent, terrible thing. And to find out that Rey learned this power, which is ultimately kind of carries her through the film and helps her journey along the way, she can also use that to reforge these sacred crystals that are ultimately kind of, you know, from my understanding, like the kyber crystals are kind of bonded to the life force of the Jedi. So it's really, really interesting just kind of go into that mythical, this mythology of the Jedi, that you can heal a kyber crystal, or you can reforge it through these healing powers. And that also carries over to the physical world.
So what I thought was interesting about this is that it's different than Ahsoka, say, purifying the crystal.
Yes.
So you have let's call it a blue lightsaber, and then you bleed it and it becomes red, and then you have Ahsoka coming along and purifying that crystal, which turns it white. But this is different. It's the kyber is cracked, and it needs to be mended, and so her ability can mend it. It almost makes me wonder if it was a red crystal, she wouldn't be turning it white. She would just be allowing it to work again, and it would still be red, I assume. So I kind of read into that. It's just it's just another wording or another thing to be added to the whole, how you can manipulate kyber, right?
Yeah, and I wonder too, and don't mean to go off on too much of a sidetrack, but I wonder if this is, a little seed for, we're looking towards the High Republic now is what's going to continue, if we might be learning more about things like this, these healing powers, and the way that the kyber works too. And I totally forgot about Ahsoka purifying the crystal. You're right. Good for pointing that out. So you can do lots of stuff.
Yep. All right. Another one is, one of the reasons that Kylo wants to destroy Rey is he believes that their bond is the last bit of light inside of him, and he's very conflicted about actually pulling the trigger on destroying that last bit of light inside of him. I think that as the story goes on here, we'll get to the end eventually, but the whole understanding of the dyad is much more grand in the book than it is in the movie. I even think to this day, we recently did an episode of Resistance Broadcast. It might have even had just come out yesterday, and we were discussing Kylo Ren and his connection to Rey when they were long before The Force Awakens, and it shows his connection, and she's like, did you feel that, the cold? And she's like on Jakku with Unkar Plutt, and we're like, wait a minute, this is long before Snoke bridged their minds and stuff. There's still this kind of confusion over what is the dyad, and I definitely think this book makes it clear that, speaking of the High Republic, there's a bigger story about what it means to be how the master and the apprentice is like a new thing, whereas they used to look more at, you're looking for your soulmate, and when you find your soulmate, you have such a bigger connection to learn and grow with that individual than you do with someone just teaching you how the Force works. It's almost like you're at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
In that sense. And Palpatine was aware of that. He goes, dude, I haven't seen something like this in a long time. This is the trick to the real power. I just kept doing the master and apprentice thing because that was the way of the Sith and we had to do it. But I'm down with this totally. So, and like I said, I think that's explained a little bit more, but this is the beginning of it, that these two are connected in a very specific way.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, Kylo's kind of running headfirst into the dark here, but every time that he kind of misses Rey, and he does a couple of times here in terms of trying to take her out or capture her, he always has this strange admiration for her. Like, he always kind of expresses this strange admiration of like he's kind of glad she got away, because it's like, okay, I got to the darkest point or the lowest point that I can be, but there is still a little bit of hope, even though that is a conflict for him. It's almost like, people that just have conflicts like that and kind of thrive on like kind of interpersonal turmoil. And he's been abused, his whole life. We're learning that more from the comic books and things like that. So he's, there's a lot going on in his head psychologically. So, I thought that it was really cool that she kind of kept sprinkling that in there, that he was grateful that there was still hope. He was grateful that there might still be a way out of there, even though he's still kind of plunging headfirst into the darkness through through most of this film, or most of this story, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
And then the dyad part that you bring up too, and this is something I noted later, but we can talk about it now since we're talking about it. Palpatine actually thinks to himself when he figures out that they have a dyad, he's like, this is what I was trying to do with Anakin the whole time, and I could never do it. And, you know, I just kind of recently took a deep dive on that Darth Vader comics, and it is one thing that is really underlined is how cruel Palpatine was to Vader, you know, once he had broken him and bent him to his way. And this kind of shows that, like, you know, they're achieving this dyad when there's empathy and when there's love and when there's understanding. It's not about being more powerful than one another. It's about kind of reconciling your differences and finding your similarities in the Force. And, you know, I think in that documentary, they talked about how Terrio was using Joseph Campbell's, because Joseph Campbell, you know, describes dyad as a way to relate to marriage, and what you're talking about with soulmates as well. So I thought it was a really lovely way that she said that, you know, there's something good between these two characters that brought out, you know, the power to ultimately defeat evil. And even when evil thought that they had achieved this dyad and taken that power, it still couldn't do it because that empathy and that love and that connection wasn't there. So, I loved it. So,
I mean, as we get into more of the end of the book, there's a lot to be talked about there. Let's talk about another thing. Rey learned from Leia that Anakin built 3PO, and she knew a little bit about this history. That is what it is.
It's
We're
nice.
Telling you that happens in the book.
Yeah, that's about it. I think she mentions that he was in the Clone Wars, and she doesn't mention anything about the memory wipe, but yeah, she knows he's a bit of a hero, so I like that. I'm all for droid power.
Yep, and we discussed this a little bit earlier, but it's important to add it here as well. That Hux's big motivation for catching Chewie was to rattle Kylo Ren. We said that earlier about it seems like in this novel, his big thing was, I just want him to lose. It says he had a sense the past relationship Ben Solo had with Chewie would surely stir up conflict within him, and it obviously did.
Yeah, that interrogation scene is pretty hard for Kylo, because he has to dig through all the memories he has of Ben Solo, you know, being with Chewbacca and you can tell that that's a pretty gut-wrenching scene for him. Hux knew that, you know, this is kind of what Kylo Ren does to people, and like he's going to have to go through this. And so I thought that was a pretty clever move of Hux to kind of shake the cage. But yeah.
And we'll get to that here in a second. Again, another thing, Hux specifically mentioned that he's also kind of rooting for Rey, because that is also emotional conflict for Kylo Ren. So anything that could mess with his head and throw him off his game is something that they go into depth with within Hux's mind and his motivations as well. It's also mentioned that Rey originally saw Vader's mask in Kylo's mind during the Force Awakens mind probe scene. So one of the things that when he's reaching in and she says, you're afraid that you'll never be as strong as Darth Vader. They don't show you, but this novelization says that one of the things that she is clicking in is one of the visions of this mask, she has a vision of the mask.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool.
Next up on the list, it was suggested. Suggested Lando decided to join the Resistance as he saw the First Order taking the Falcon. This was just another thing, like based on them landing on Pisana and being around this time. We all know from the movie that Lando said, I'm not moving forward with this, you know, I'm not going to be part of the Resistance of somebody else's war, but he does come back. And the novelization kind of explains a little bit about maybe why he decided to up and join the fight again.
Yeah, there's just kind of this ominous view. He's watching that whole scene with the Knights of Ren taking the Falcon unfold, and then he's like, you know what? He's like, I can still do this. He doesn't come point blank out and say it, but he's just like, I think it's something like, I know what I need to do now. And then, he kind of goes away and we don't see him for a while. But I thought that was cool that we got to see him have that realization.
Mm-hmm. And then after that, we got, now this is actually what you were talking about earlier, the Chewbacca torture scene. So it is kind of sad to know that this does actually happen. He didn't just get captured and put in a cell and then rescued. Chewbacca did get tortured, and he did get tortured by Ben. And or Kylo Ren, I should say. And there is a couple flashbacks here where they're talking about these characters growing up. And there's also another thing too that I made note of later that happens later in the movie, or in the book, I should say. But yeah, these are like legit flashbacks of them, growing up and hanging out and having a friendship with his dad's best friend. I guess you could say like Uncle Chewie to a degree. Yeah.
For sure. It was, that was brutal. I mean, I think you're referring to something that happens later too, but like, these moments where you're kind of seeing the past and maybe like what could have been before it all fell apart it was pretty sad to read. And on top of that, that Chewbacca is getting tortured. No one likes that. So it was, I can understand why that, wouldn't have been in the film. And, I would be surprised if they even filmed that or that was even in the script. So, I guess we're into Zorii now.
Yes. So there's a lot to Zori's story here. That's kind of funny. It rhymed. So Zorii on Kijimi, this is after they've been on the Resistance crew has met with her. They've left, and there's a couple different flashbacks throughout the story. We'll go through them in order as they happen in the book, but the first one is Zorii on Kijimi observing some First Order officers and kind of getting the idea that, there was some bad stuff going to happen, maybe even possibly destruction of the city or planet or whatever. And that's the first one. From there, there's also another scene where, convincing people to get off the planet. She goes back and she says, "Hey, friends of mine, we got to get out of here." And that sets up what we saw in the movie. Yeah. It's just nice to see the extended version of it.
Yeah. And it was nice too to see that she's, because they present her kind of like one foot on the, I'm out for myself, I'm going to get to the colonies. And then we see her give up that opportunity and just so Rey and Poe and Finn can rescue Chewie. And so I thought it was cool that they really underlined that, like, this is a really moral person who wants to make the galaxy a better place. It's not just, some character from Poe's dark past or whatever, that this is there's a reason why she was drawn to him and he was drawn to her, is because, these are good people. So
the next thing on the list, I guess, is Leia and Luke talk through the Force multiple times.
Yes.
Now this is kind of hard to kind of put because it's throughout. It's pretty much anytime Leia you see her in the movie or you see her in the book, she's also kind of having this conversation with Luke, and Luke just seems to be pressing her the whole time, saying, "It's time, you know what you have to do." And she goes, "No, I can't leave everybody." And then there's some other points where it talks about her acceptance of what she needs to do. So what are your thoughts on their Force conversations?
I wish they could have incorporated this somehow. And I'm surprised that they didn't have, Mark's voice or Luke's voice speaking to her. I know that it would have been hard for them to get, Carrie Fisher's voice to sync up with that. But if there would have been a way where, hey, even just like once, I think that would have been huge for so many people. And, I wanted, I know we see them together at the end as a Force ghost, but I think that would have been a really nice way also to set up for Luke's return on Octu as well. I mean, we were all expecting him to show up at some point, but I think it would have been nice if he would have shown up, and helped his sister find peace. I took it as she kind of joked, like, it was like, hey, my brother's hassling me here a little bit. And there was kind of like a back and forth between them. But I ultimately think it was like him helping her find peace in a way. Like, look, trust in the Force, trust in this person that you've put all your good faith in. And she knew that there was one more thing she had to do, which is, it's incredibly touching what happens. And that she's trying to reach out to her son for the last time. But I think it would have been really cool to just have Luke's voice occasionally kind of pop up at least once, maybe right before her death.
Yeah, I understand that. But I think that all has to just tie into there's only so much they could do with Carrie.
Yeah.
I think the implication with the movie is just supposed to be like, we're going to push her and very clearly make her a Jedi master. And you're supposed to know she's very involved in the Force. She's teaching Rey. There's no way she's not talking to Luke. It's just kind of one of those things like when you read it in the book, you're like, oh yeah, duh. And I think the movie kind of plays on that, but they don't give it to you. They don't tell you. So you have to, I don't know. You have to kind of put it together. And that's another thing that I think the book is good for. Two more quick things. I guess Leia extended goodbye to the Resistance. That's all part of her just saying, we kind of talked about that. What the legacy of what I'm leaving behind and stuff like that. These are kind of internal thoughts. But the next thing is that we get Zorii back on the planet and she refers to her ship as the Comeuppance. Is that correct? Yeah, the Comeuppance. So that is her personal Y-Wing. And there's also an extended scene with Zorii being involved with a young girl whose name is Luda, and how she has been fighting on the planet for a while. And she says, no, I need to do this to help you get off the planet. And Zorii kind of like lets her do it, but she basically like distracts some other First Order officers to allow Zorii to get away. That's right. Was this character important to you, or?
I mean, it was nice. It was, again, I really like that it kind of underscored that, Zorii has she kind of has her crew of people and they all look up to her. And this character, ultimately sacrificed something for her so that she could get away because she saw the greater good. So it wasn't absolutely necessary to me, but I'm glad that it was in there. It was a nice little moment that added to the character for me, because I really did enjoy Zorii Bliss in the film. So that was, thought so.
All right, so we're at the Death Star now. Kylo Ren knew that Rey was headed specifically to the second Death Star because Pride had scanned and deciphered the Sith Blade. So the Sith Blade had the information that got Rey and the crew there. So they were able to decipher that using old technology, probably from the Empire or something like that. Pride was able to use this and decipher it. So that's how Kylo knew where Rey was going without having the secret, which is a good explanation. Because like, how did he know where she was going to go?
Totally. And yeah, I thought that too. I was glad that was in there, that he just, instead of him just kind of showing up. So, and it kind of goes into the next one too, about 3PO giving the specific coordinates.
Yeah. So not that this was like a big thing, but I remember having casual conversations with friends who aren't as into Star Wars as I am, but it was one of the takeaways is like, how dumb was that Goonies saber sword thing, the dagger?
Yes, I thought it was dumb too.
And I don't know if it was so much like this was the way they understood it, or if it's Rae Carson saying, all right, that I need to help that make sense. But one of the big changes for me is that when I came out of the movie, I felt like if you had coordinates to where to go next, it was just telling you to go to this planet, or it was just telling you to go directly to like, this particular spot on the planet where it is. And that's not the case. What it says was it tells you where to go to stand in the specific spot, which the saber will then give you the next step. So I remember thinking like, how dumb is that? what a coincidence that they just happen to be standing in the exact spot where that would line up. Anywhere else around that particular point, it would have never lined up. Well, that's the key. The key is that the coordinates were to stand on this edge of this ocean, on the southeast side of this thing, and then hold it up. And only this blade tells makes a little bit more sense. It's like, okay, so what's the next step? You only know if you have the blade. Like, and that it all starts to make sense now. At least it makes more sense. So it's still Goonies-esque, but it's not like dumb luck that they happen to be standing in the right spot.
I agree with everything you just said there. Yeah, that was the same thing for me when I was in the theater. I was like, what? Kind of like, well, isn't that nice? But yeah, I'm glad that Rae Carson, I have a feeling that was something that maybe she probably said to the story group or whomever, and was like, hey, maybe this is something we could clarify using the text. So yeah, I'm glad that was in there.
Okay, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about this one, because this one I did not pick up on at all. I think this has to do with the trailers. So go ahead and read this one off.
Sorry, I totally lost our spot here.
I'll do it. It's but I do Kylo Ren line is delivered when he tells Rey he knows what's behind the darkness inside of her. And also the no one knows, but I do is from the trailer is actually in this segment, but it's obviously at a different spot.
Yeah, so you never really hear that conversation, that line in the film itself, and it was a huge moment in the trailer. I remember for me and a lot of other fans where, you hear Rey in her head, in the book, you're hearing her in her head say, just as you hear her Daisy Ridley's narration in the trailer, no one really knows who I am. And you hear those thoughts in her head. And then as the wave crashes, just as it does, and Kylo's coming out of the wave before he starts his attack on her again, he just says to her through the Force, but I know I do, but I do. And it was that very cool, I think, kind of Mr. Darcy moment that everybody wanted, or not everybody, but a lot of people wanted in the Rise of Skywalker, that, no one really knew. That line resonated with a lot of folks in the trailer, and no one really knew what it was going to come. And then when it didn't even show up in the film, I think a lot of people were like, wait, what was the context of that? So I think it's cool that it was thrown in there as well. So yeah, that was an interesting, I don't know if that was her like homage to the trailer or whatever, because it's a pretty great trailer, but yeah, I thought that was nice.
All right, we're here now. This is my favorite part of the novelization.
Okay.
I think. So the next part is Leia's passing in her discussions with Luke. So again, this is going back to anything that Luke says here is going to be something derivative of the fact of like, you know what you have to do. You have to use your last energy to reach out to Ben. It's that one thing that still is left to be done. But I'm going to read this segment.
Go for it.
And this is what I like had to stop the book and be like, I have to write this down because this is too important. And it says, she was Leia Skywalker, Organa Solo, and as she caressed Han's metal, she fully embraced those inheritances, and she would pass them all to the next generation. Her Skywalker legacy would go to Rey, Organa to Poe, and she would try one last time to pass her Solo legacy to her son. This, to me, was just, I don't know, it's one, again, I'm going back to this theme, like, it's all there. I think a lot of stuff that happens in this movie, you walk out of the theater and you go, man, I've been building up a story in my head for years, or even decades, of what I think the end of this saga would be and what episode 9 would be. And then you spent 2 hours with the film and you walk out and you make a judgment about it, oh, I did or didn't like that. It was terrible or it was awesome or whatever. But I think there are so many things that have yet to be uncovered because we do listen to podcasts and we do listen to discussions and we do watch the special features on a Blu-ray with J.J. Abrams explaining his point of view on that. And we start to go, oh, I never thought about it like that. This is just another one of those things to me that, like, thinking about how much Leia holds those names to heart. She was Leia Skywalker Organa Solo, and she was going to hand those names to their new inheritances, and her relationship with all these characters are being handed down in very specific ways based on who she is as a person. Because she's like, 3 different parts of her, there's 3 different parts, and she's handing down those parts to different people. And it's in the movie, but it's not in the movie. It's like, it's just something that, like, you have to theorize, and you have to consider, and you have to kind of write and draw those connections over years of people talking about it. And it's just amazing to me that Rae Carson did it so quickly and laid it out right here in the book for you. It's just another thing.
Yeah, I really like that moment as well too. That it was to me, I took it more as like a metaphorical sense of passing down her name and passing down, what each name represents, where, the Skywalker, that's, the Jedi, the connection to the Force, the connection to this like mighty bloodline. And then the Organa's, kind of the leadership, the role that she played as a hero of the rebellion, and then ultimately somebody that was a stabilizing figure for the New Republic for an amount of time, to Poe. And then also I thought it was really interesting that she chose the Solo name to go to Ben. It is his literal last name, but I think that it's interesting that she's, this kind of good force that she is in the universe, and this strength and this wisdom, that was always something that Han gravitated towards. And that was always something that that's something that brought him into the fight eventually. And I don't think that that's exactly what Rae Carson took that as, but I thought that it was really nice that, that was what she was kind of hoping to do, was to tap into that part of Han that's in Ben to kind of hopefully bring him back to the fight as well. Because obviously he's very deep in the Skywalker name and the Skywalker heritage as well, but also kind of using this good nature of his father to hopefully to bring him back. So, but yeah, I thought that was a really nice passage that she wrote there.
Yeah. I also, from this section, I also get the impression that when she dies, she goes to Luke. Like, they are together when she passes. The other thing is that what she does is she reaches out to Ben to tell him, like, I don't know, it's kind of weird because it feels a little contradictory to The Last Jedi, but I think what she's trying to say is, I never gave up on you, or I always knew there was good in you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though it's kind of weird because The Last Jedi, she says, I know there's no saving him.
Yeah, but she does say that before Luke, and I've always taken, this is kind of a Last Jedi thing, but I've always taken Luke going to Kylo Ren as an act of love there, and he was trying to teach him the last lesson of mercy. Like, here, this is your last chance. You're coming to the edge here. If you kill me, I'm always going to be with you. This terrible thing is always going to be with you. And so I felt like Leia, knowing that that's what Luke did, maybe that gave her a spark of hope again. And she does express a little bit of hope about him in Resistance Reborn by Rebecca Roanhorse. So I feel like, Leia she was kind of at the lowest of lows when she said that, and then kind of started to come up from that, when they escaped and there was still a spark of hope.
Yep.
So,
all right, well, let's move on.
Okay.
Now we're back to Babu Frick.
I like him.
There's a scene with Babu Frick before Kijimi explodes, and Babu is reactivating the battle droid, and then he escapes. Thoughts on this?
I thought that was just a cool little scene. I mean, I like that little guy a lot, and so I thought it was cool that it was, throwing a little bit of a bone to Clone Wars and prequel fans too, that, he was working on battle droids. And I liked it. I mean, there wasn't too much to it, but it was nice too that because I was afraid. I'm like, oh no, are they going to kill Babu in the book? But they, at the very last minute, he gets out of there. But we don't know what happened to the battle droid, though. I don't know if the battle droid made it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, there's not a whole lot to say about this next thing, but multiple points of view after Leia's death, including how Finn took it, and then even Dio specifically. Now we obviously got a good view of how Poe handled it in the movie, but there is also a great moment here of reflection and self-doubt post Leia's death from Poe's perspective. It's kind of an extended scene as well. Anything to add to that stuff? I don't know if anything stuck out, like the Finn or the Dio or whatever.
Not too much. I mean, Poe is mainly who I think of in this scene, from the film and the book. And, it seems like a really big moment for him too, where he's like, okay, because he's been struggling a bit in the film too. He's really frustrated, kind of running on fumes the whole time. You can, see that. And so it was good for him to just be like, look, this is it. Like, there's no more time to figure this out. Like, I am the leader now and I need to do this. And it felt like it was, kind of, he really worked through that self-doubt and it really, it added strength to the character. So I enjoyed it, even though it's a kind of a sadder moment in the book. So, yeah.
Extended interactions between R2 and 3PO. These guys have been in it through thick and thin, right?
Yeah.
So just a couple lines in the movie, which are important lines, and they totally get the message across. But if you have the opportunity to write some extended dialogue, Rae Carson took the opportunity.
Yes, she did. I was glad. It was nice to see R2 kind of following him around the base for a bit, pestering him about the, restoring his memory, where in the movie, it's just like, kind of like, hey, maybe I can do this. And then like they cut in a very comical way. All of a sudden, like, oh yeah, it's done. No one really says no to R2. So, but yeah, that was cool. So.
Yep. It says that he actually chased him around. I thought was kind of funny.
Yeah, I thought so too. So I enjoyed that.
Again, nothing too important, but Rey interacts with the caretakers briefly. We just wanted to mention there is a segment there where when she goes back to Octo, she does have a couple interactions with them.
Seemed like a bit more of a process for her to find the Wayfinder too. Where in the film she just kind of realizes, oh yeah, it's in the wreckage. But here, I think Luke maybe tells her that it's in there. I mean, he says she has everything she needs in the film, but I feel like in the book it took her a little more time to figure out how she was actually going to get to Exegol. Well,
speaking of the Wayfinder too, I think something that the novelization did that was really cool was to mention that when she goes into the throne room back on the Death Star, we didn't really mention this, but it's a good point to talk about it. She walks up to the door, and the door opens mechanically, despite the fact that the Death Star wreckage has been destroyed.
Yeah.
Right. It's obviously not plugged in right now, if you will.
Yeah.
But there's almost this sense of, I think the way that it's written is more like that the door opened in a via the Force sort of way because she was Palpatine, or she belonged to Palpatine. And it's almost sense that it's like him programming a door and saying don't open for anybody but me. And then you think of a descendant of a clone of Palpatine, the door would be oh, that's Palpatine.
Yeah.
I just thought that was cool.
It's like, I know those midi-chlorians, open sesame type of thing. So yeah, for sure.
Next thing up in the book is Cara Kun appearance saying goodbye to Snap. This comes when Lando is on the Resistance base, and they kind of give we're getting ready to talk about Lando entering the Falcon. This is all kind of in that section. Lando's on the base, and he's looking around, and he's like, man, it's like the old days. People running around, hooking up wires, pushing buttons, not knowing what to do, but getting it done. And one of the things he mentions is that Snap Wexley is saying goodbye, or mentioning this character who's mostly known from the Poe Dameron comics. So thoughts on the scene?
Yeah, I thought it was just a good moment because that relationship was so important in the comics and also in Resistance Reborn. And I think that that Lando also even mentions something like, "Oh, it's Wedge's stepson" or something like that. He says something.
Yes.
So, because I really, I was after Nora.
I don't even think he says stepson. I think he says Wedge Antilles' son, Snap.
Oh, okay, cool.
I could be wrong on that, but I didn't get the impression that it was so many steps. It was just like Wedge's kid.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm glad that they did that. I know it would have been really hard to include like Nora and Wedge and that whole relationship in the film, so I'm glad it got a little bit of a shout out here. And I love Cara Coon from the comics as well. So, and I thought it was really pretty how that was his last words too. He whispered
That's what I was
going to
say. Snap's death in the book is the last thing that he says is Cara. Yeah.
So that was a nice moment.
So including Lando on the base, he does go onto the Falcon and has a couple memories there. He's walking around the ship and he goes into a couple different rooms. And I think the big one here is that he goes into Chewbacca's quarters and there's some sort of like hologram or something there. Yeah, a video of Chewbacca and Ben, which goes to show that that's like something that Chewbacca regularly looks at.
Yeah, I know. It was like, yeah, that really, really touched me there because it was just shows like what a, kind of altruistic character that Chewbacca is. And that he, once he's found this bond to Han and, that must have been equally heartbreaking for him to not only see Han be murdered, but be murdered at the hand of his son. And this person that Chewbacca has also cared about and thought of his family, his whole, since the son's been born. So, I thought it kind of really underscored not only like the heartbreak of the loss of Han and the heartbreak of what's happened to Ben Solo over the years, but also that, Chewbacca is just a good character and he's nothing but love and just kind of wants the best for everybody. So it was a really nice moment. And I loved Lando walking around the Falcon too. That was so great. I just wish he would have gone over to that port and said hi to K2SO. That was one thing I was sure was going to be in the novel.
You mean L3?
L3. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, L3. Got my droids mixed up.
Yeah, it does seem a little missed opportunity for the writer of the novelization who has all the time in the world to just say like, and he thought about his days back when he first met Han Solo, Yeah. And just give us a little bit of that Solo, a Star Wars story love, Yeah. But we're not talking about the things that aren't in the book.
We're
talking about the things that are in the book.
But it was still a really nice moment, I thought.
It is, yeah. All right, we got a scene with a character named Sabrand. Is that right?
Yeah, and this was one I didn't really pick it up. I think it was something I wasn't sure at the time if it was in the film or as well, but it wasn't. So maybe you refresh my memory a bit.
The thing about this scene to me is like, I think it holds no real relevance to the story. I think it's just there to add a little bit of scope to Pride, to General Pride. And I think the idea behind the scene is that they have a person who's on the ship who's like, man, I've been in this thing for a very long time. A little bit, I guess, like you could say the Sith Eternal as well. Like in all those cultists on the planet, she's one of these people. And she says she sees Pride and she's like, that dude's awesome. I love him. I want to be him. He's been here like leading us. He's just a great leader. Her character is not important. She's a character created to boost General Pride and his status in the Final Order.
Yeah. I did get that. I got much more of a sense that he's, been in the know about this for longer than he's let on. Which it kind of is hinted at the movie, but it's basically confirmed here that he's known about this the whole time.
Yeah. I mean, also he's like talking to the Emperor and stuff in the movie. Yeah. So yeah, like, he's been around.
I'm your bud. Remember me? Yeah.
Yeah. Also, we're now at Exegol, and this is something that Palpatine says to Rey, and I just thought it was. I mean, he says a couple lines, obviously, that are not in the movie, in the book, but the big one to me, I think, is "Take my life, and you will ascend, as I did when I killed my master, Darth Plagueis." So Plagueis gets a straight up shout out, and I don't even know really like where to soak all this in, because even we're still like months out from the movie, right? We've had it, we've watched it, we've digested it, and still to this day we're trying to piece together what does all this mean. Yeah, he's back. He found the key to cheating death. Darth Plagueis taught him this. You know, it's like where does all this stuff fit in? And I just thought it was interesting that he's saying this is part of the process. You're going to kill me. You're going to take my life. Then after that, you will ascend just like I did when I killed my master, Darth Plagueis. So he's kind of giving us a little bit of hint on what happened back then. And it's just like the passing of the torch, or the embodiment of like Plagueis entering his body or something. I don't know. It's just so weird.
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes on to this. And I thought, hey man, here's a line from the novelization that might give somebody a little bit of a clue as to how all this stuff works. And and you will ascend as I did when I killed my master, Darth Plagueis. Just wanted to throw it out there. It's right there.
Yeah. You know, if there's anything that I felt was so convoluted in the film, and it is explained a bit more in the book, but was just this whole like, okay, I want you to kill Rey. No, I don't want you to kill Rey. Like, I don't want Rey to die. And it was like, it just kept going back and forth. I'm like, dude, what are you doing?
I still feel like that's confusing in the book.
Yeah.
I don't really know that the book helps with that either.
Yeah, he never really goes back, gives a reason of why he walks back on, Kylo wanting Kylo to kill Rey. And so that was something to me that was just still, it was kind of all over the map. And the throwing Plagueis in there like that, I mean, that was great to hear him reference that. I'm all about, I wanted more prequel love in the sequel trilogy, but so it was nice to get that shout out, but it really didn't do much for me in terms of clearing it up. But I'm glad it's there for people that might want a little bit more.
So speaking of people who want a little bit more, coming out of the movie, I know one of the criticisms was that Ben flies to Exegol in a TIE fighter that was from the original Death Star, and TIE fighters at that time did not have hyperdrives, so they could not fly through whatever. The book does not specifically state, and I was looking for it, how he knew or anything like that, but it does say that he flies in a scout class TIE. And I looked up scout class TIEs on Wikipedia, and they exist in Legends, but they don't currently exist in canon because the book came out today. So this might be its first whatever. And it would be very easy for the story group to say scout class TIEs were the first ones to have hyperdrive.
Dang, I have the TIE fighter manual like in the other room, but it probably wouldn't be in there if it's not canon, or it wasn't on Wikipedia, it wouldn't be there.
Yeah, I mean, it was on Wikipedia that they were, but they looked completely different, and I was like, this looks like it's from Legends or something. So I just wanted to throw it out there if anybody's looking for, did they answer that question? They sort of did, I think, by saying he flew in a TIE fighter that has never been in canon before. So it would be very easy for somebody to just be like, well, those ones did.
Yeah. Like they only made a few of them for scouting. That would make sense why they gave it the designation.
Mm-hmm.
I think it also mentions too that he used the markers, the hyperspace markers that she left for the Resistance, that somehow he was able to track those. And that's how he was able to find his way back to Exegol, which I think that was another thing people are confused about too.
I also forgot that they mentioned that he also got knocked off a track sometimes and ended up in places that he wasn't supposed to be.
So it took him a long time.
So that's good to mention as well. I put Palpatine, I wrote this down as the note, Palpatine's death in Return of the Jedi and his clone body.
Yes.
What to say about this? Okay. This was put out. This was put on Reddit as like a leak from the like con that had released the book.
Oh, okay. I stayed away from those because I wanted to go in fresh. So
I mean, it's not like a big deal or whatever. It's just one small segment that is like, what was Palpatine's process to this whole thing? And it basically goes into detail of when he was thrown off, he was like, oh, shoot, I'm about to die. Good thing I planned this, because when Darth Plagueis had learned the secret to cheat death, he didn't act fast enough, which is cool because it said that I killed him in his sleep. So he wasn't like aware that it was going to happen. It just happened. So he's falling down the shaft and he has plenty of time to be like, cool, this is the perfect opportunity to do the thing that causes me to cheat death. And what he does is he pulls his consciousness out of his body and transports it to what was already prepared as a cloned body.
Yeah.
Boom. So in a weird way, this does kind of ruin Return of the Jedi because Palpatine did not die. He moved his consciousness to another location, which was a cloned body. Yep.
Yeah.
There you
go. Being prepared by the acolytes. I, in one way, like, you know, I like, it made me think of the Aftermath books because I think it's in the final Aftermath book, The Empire's End. There's the prologue to the story is Palpatine, you know, sitting in his throne room, communicating with this unknown dark force. I think a lot of people at the time, myself included, assumed that it was Snoke or wherever Snoke came from, that Palpatine was communing with them. But he's obviously now, I mean, we know he was communing with his like Sith acolytes out on Exegol, and he was thinking about this plan the whole time. Because he even says, you know, I think it's Rax was like Gallus Rax was like the villain in Empire's End. So he's coming there to visit Palpatine, and Palpatine says something very ominous to him, like, well, you know, even if I lose this battle, I win this battle. And he, you know, so right there, you know, we know he had this plan the whole time. He was using these laboratories to communicate and pass on his order to these distant acolytes in the unknown region. So I'm glad that, you know, even though I think it is like what you said, it really undercuts a lot of the stuff in, you know, Return of the Jedi and just across the saga. It's nothing that I like about it, but I'm glad that it's explained. So I'm glad that at least I know that it's on what happened, because for a while I was like, I don't get why they did this, but now I know why, and so at least I can try to understand it now.
Yeah, we had a lot of talks about the whole, like, now that we know that his body is cloned or whatever. And it was this whole discussion of, I think if they explain that in the movie, if like it starts and they're like, the Emperor, how are you back? And he's like, I cloned myself. Then people would just be like, I'm out. Right.
Yeah.
I just think you would have lost a lot of people, been like, this is stupid. This isn't Star Wars. I'm getting out of here. So they just did everything in their can to explain in the movie that this is the true Emperor and he's back, without getting into the details, and then letting other ancillary stories explain the details later.
Yeah.
Is probably the smartest way to handle it.
I think so too.
They also go into a little bit of detail on the son as well. And it's that his son's body was not quite identical. So that's the actual wording. I'm quoting that, not quite identical. So they are implying that it's not like a duplicate body, but there was a little bit more of a mess up. They were like, oh, this kind of came out more like 50% Palpatine. You know?
Yeah, he was the bad batch.
Like when, I guess so. When there's like a man and a woman and they put together their individual parts, you have something new that is part the father. This was kind of the way that they're explaining, like, oh, it's a son without being a son. There wasn't a mother. We made a clone, but it's not quite the same as the clone, is different. So it was like them kind of explaining how a son was created from a clone. Yeah. I don't know. It's just kind of interesting.
Yeah. And again, something I'm glad that that was clarified.
So I talked a little bit about this earlier, but I'm going to let you have the floor here. The stronger emphasis on the importance of the dyad.
Yeah, and just to go back to that, and it was again, and I talked a bit about it earlier, that it really shows how powerful and how rare this connection that that Ben and Kylo and Rey all had together, and when we see it finally kind of come to fruition, and eventually overtake the Emperor, because he thinks that this is something he can use against Rey, because she ends up being the only one to face him. Really he's missing the key component of what this is. And like what you said, this is, you're bounded to somebody, you're bounded to them in the physical world and in the spiritual world. And it really underscored the mythology to me. And it was a nice way to make that bond something more than it is, and that it's based on love and on empathy and all the good things that the Jedi represent and the light side represents. So that was something that I thought was huge, because he mentions he was trying to do this with Anakin for years. And as we know, he was just this cruel master to Anakin and taunted him, much like Snoke did to Ben and that kind of thing. And so, it's kind of sending us through the story that like ultimately love wins and hope wins. So that was what I liked. So
for me, I think that when I was watching the movie, they're like, oh, check it out. Big reveal, a dyad in the Force. And I don't know, maybe, I went to public schools or something. I don't know what the heck a dyad is. I have no clue. I walked out of the movie going, a what? And the only thing I could like contextually try to understand that statement is a vergence in the Force, some sort of mystical connection that he's surprised about. The book still explains it as a dyad, but the way it's explained in the book is a little bit more in the understanding that maybe we would have as like a soulmate. The only difference here that I would say is, and we'll get to this too, is I still think the book as well really rides the line on not clarifying if they are romantic. And we'll get to the kiss and the wording there. We'll have a little bit of discussion on how that was portrayed in the book. But I was almost expecting the book to lean on one side or the other of whether this was a romantic relationship or not. And the whole aspect of the dyad is like, they're saying soulmate without saying it, because soulmate implies your one true love. Are you following me on that?
Yeah.
So I think soulmate's the wrong word, but when you think about how like there's one person out there for me, right? But take the romantic aspect out of it and saying there's a person out there that I am connected with, that I feel it and I know it's important, and I'm just supposed to be with that person, and I'm supposed to find them, and we're supposed to be together. Again, not romantic, but maybe romantic. I don't know. They just don't really explain it. So they have had this connection for a very long time. And like I said earlier, there's something that they're kind of saying that like there used to be a little bit more of this is how we teach the Force. You're Force sensitive? Cool. You need to go find your dyad. You need to go find your other person. And they don't teach that anymore. They abandoned that idea to teach like, I'm a master. Forget looking for your other person. I'm just going to teach you the ways of the Force, and then you'll hand that down to the next person. The master and apprentice model was taught later. Emperor Palpatine, or I should say Darth Sidious, knows all this, and he is aware that he's like, well, the Sith do it this way. This is the way that it is. But if I know my history, the dyad is the way they used to do it, and it's way cooler. And he was trying to like artificially create a dyad, and it didn't really work. But here he is right in front of him, presented with a dyad, and he's like, what? Okay. Yeah. All right. I'm using this. It's here right in front of me. I'm going to use it. And I think that paints a way bigger picture to the lore of what happens in the Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah. I mean, we're not at the kiss part yet, but, or, you know, or what, you know, looking into what, you know, is officially considered, you know, Ben and Rey's relationship and how that bond worked. But
actually, I mean, we can go into it right now.
Okay.
I don't really have the kiss as something that's different in the book.
Yeah,
but
I didn't either.
Write down. I wrote down, and I said this would just be fun for anybody who's wondering, like, oh, does the story write it out like a romantic kiss or not? Here's actually what's written. It says, his heart was full as Rey reached for his face and let her fingers linger along his cheek, which sounds romantic. But then listen to the next part. Oh, and then, wonder of wonders, she kissed him, a kiss of gratitude, acknowledgement of their connection, and celebration that they'd found each other at last, which does not sound romantic at all. It sounds like the author very clearly writing out, yes, they're kissing on the lips, but it's a momentary, like, hooray. Like, there's no like sexual chemistry here. It's just that we are happy that we are together. But I don't know. I mean, he's saying that her fingers were like longingly caressing his cheek. It's like, and wonder of wonders, like, she kissed him. Like, it almost makes it seem like maybe he's attracted to her, but he's in the friend zone or something. Yeah. I don't know. And she's just like really glad that they found each other and that she was able to save him, and he's alive and he's here, but there's nothing. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I hear
we're talking the Rise of Skywalker now.
No, it's confusing, and I share, like, I was bummed that wasn't just, they didn't just say it, because I'm a big believer that it was romantic. I mean, you know, earlier in the book she says, you know, after she heals him, and she says it in the film as well, you know, with just saying, like, I would have gone with you, I would have done this with you, but I would have done it with Ben Solo, and that's who I see, that's who I care about, that's who I'm fighting for. And so here at the end, I was really bummed out. That's another reason why I didn't score it higher, is that this was something that I think really did need to be clarified for a lot of people. And you know, we're not entitled to anything. We can hope for what we get, but it was. I didn't like how, just the way that you presented it, they kind of walked up to it being romantic, you know, and on film, to me, that was a romantic kiss. I mean, there was nothing in that I saw that would recommend, you know, make it familial or friendly or anything like that. That was a moment of, like, I see you, you see me, where we've found this space for at least 1 second in time. You know, she didn't know he was going to die right afterwards, but that they can just embrace this in this, you know, a lot of it didn't come together in a perfect way, but at least they had that, you know, that one moment together. And so I've always taken it as love, and this, the way that that passage kind of convolutes it was a bit disappointing for me. But that's just my take. And that, you know, again, like, I can see people, you know, seeing that and enjoying that as well. And, you know, that's not a criticism of Rae Carson as a writer or anything like that. I wish she either would have just gone with it or been like, okay, no, they were buddies or something like that.
I think there's almost like the business aspect of it, of they're saying, hey, how do you want me to write this scene? Because I know there are fans that want this to be romantic and they're diehard for it. And then there's other fans that want this to be not romantic. And this isn't even Rae Carson. This is also like J.J. Abrams. Like, what do we do here? And again, I heard this like through leaks or whatever, but people saying that the kiss was like, they shot it just simply to be like, well, let's have it. And then let's have the discussion later about if we want to include it in the film. And the whole idea of this scene was like a compromise. So it's like, we're going to have them kiss, but we're also going to like state that that it's whatever you want it to be. And I think that carries through to the book. They don't want to tell you because then there's a definitive answer. They want people to make it their own thing, I think. Yeah. Which is just riding the line and not falling on either side. And it's more so clear by them doing that here that I think that's what they're ultimately going for.
Yeah, and I agree. I agree. That's probably why they did it. I don't like it, but that's just me. But it's but yeah, I totally see what you're talking about though. With them kind of wanting to give the best. So
okay, guys, so we've hit the climax.
Yeah, here we are.
Let's ride it home. There's only a few more details.
Okay.
We can end this thing running up pretty almost near 2 hours.
Man.
Let's see here.
A marathon for you, James.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, because it's been like 4 hours for me. I've been recording a lot.
Yeah, we'll get through this.
Let's see here. Where are we at? Oh,
we're fighters,
okay, so we're on Exegol, the fighters who call before the Battle of Exegol. So we had talked about the possibility of, man, I just hope they go to this scene where like we get all this fan service, and it's like, when Lando says, but there's more of us, and they fly up here. We all wanted to see like Ghost checking in, and it's like Hera, live action Hera, in her cockpit and stuff.
That would have been so
we didn't
cool.
get it.
No,
we didn't get it. But the novelization does give it to you if you want it. It does happen. Poe is on the radio, and there's a lot of people they say, and I'll list them all. And it starts with Mon Calamari Freight. Okay, that's just kind of random. But then from there they go Phantom Squadron checking in, the Ghost checking in. Then they say Anodyne 2, which I don't know who that is, and I tried to look that up. I
couldn't find anything about that.
Maybe that's another story that they're going to be like, wait till you see Mandalorian season 2, and then later people will look back and be like, oh, the Anodyne 2, that's awesome.
Yeah.
They also mentioned the Alphabet 2, which I'm assuming is going to come up in the stories, just like what I just said.
Yeah, we have another Alphabet Squadron book closely
when we get the other Alphabet Squadron stuff. Versio and Inferno Squad checking in. Yep, they're all there.
Very excited about that.
And then we specifically get lines from Kaz, who says, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then it's weird because you hear this voice come in, and I'm fairly certain it might even be the same voice actor because they do such a good job. But I swear it's Yeager. It's got to be Yeager. We know his ship is there because of the .com article that said, these 3 ships are there. And he's on the mic and he's like, hey, cut the chatter, Kaz. So it's
kind of classic.
I don't know. It's just, it's great to just hear that they're there and they have lines. And I even went to a friend and I showed him, like, he was on the phone. We work at a call center. I showed him a thing that says Kaz and Yeager have lines in the novelization. And he was like, oh,
nice.
So yeah, I'm pretty excited to get that rep there.
Yeah, it was nice for me too, because I had just finished the second season of The Resistance like 2 days before this. I had been kind of working when that came on Disney Plus. So it was nice to have those characters get a shout out, because I was like, oh, they're going to be there for sure. So, and it's nice to know that they're there. So there is another person who was at the Battle of Exegol. Yeah, there was.
And apparently did not make it out. So it's been all over the internet, people talking about trying to break down the frames of whether this character made it out or not. But I can officially say that the novelization does confirm that Neem Num did die on the Tantive 4.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on this?
Well, I didn't know that was such a thing because I really kind of avoided any leaks or anything, any pages that leaked. And so when I read it in the book, I was like, oh, that's, I don't remember that at all. But then when I watched the film the day after I had finished the novelization, and I was like, oh, that was a question? Because I know they don't show like the ship explode, but I was like, he seemed like he was gonna die there. But yeah, it's too bad he didn't make it out.
I think like after the movie came out, everybody had like Akbar fever, and they were like, oh, you killed off an old character, but maybe not. We didn't really see it, die or whatever. I think the tricky thing is it was like the ship was going down after the big electrical bolt. I could be wrong on this.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Remember,
yeah.
There was that, and then like that affected all the ships, but some of the ships came back, so you never see him again. So you're thinking like maybe he came back, but no, they make it pretty clear in the novelization that like when that happens, everything explodes on the Tantive 4 and everybody on board dead. So
that one looked especially crispy when the Sith lightning hit it. So I was. Yeah, maybe because I'd already read the book, but I was like, yeah, he's dead. That's too bad, though. Oh, wow.
All right, so the next thing here, I'm going to let you take this one, actually. Give a little explanation on this one, but long story short, Lando sitting with Jannah.
Yeah, so I know that in the film, a lot of people thought that implied that it was Lando's daughter, and I didn't necessarily subscribe to that. I thought it was very open to her interpretation, but I think the novelization very clearly says that he's not, and that he is. I mean, it doesn't come right out and say that, but it doesn't really go in the direction of him being her father. It's more he sees maybe what he thinks his daughter, or what became of his daughter in Jannah, and then he's inspired to, because she wants to go find out where she came from. He's inspired to not only help her, but he has this epiphany that like, here's my place. Like, here's what I can do. I can go with all these first order troopers, that they're free now and they want to go back to their lives, and I can help them do that. And I thought that was such a cool way to kind of send Lando Calrissian off into the sunset and give him, this kind of final last chapter in his life. And also, we don't really know if there's going to be many stories to come beyond Tross, but it really does leave a door open for a pretty cool story to me. I mean, I would love to read that book.
Whether it's a book or an animated series, live action series, it'd be cool to see Billy D come back. I kind of doubt it, but no, I think you're exactly right. They don't directly say like, I know she's not my daughter or something, something along those lines. Yeah. But they really paint the inner monologue between the lines in the movie. In the movie, it shows him kind of thinking, but in the novelization, they tell you what he's thinking, and it's a whole thing about how he can help these lost kids.
Yeah.
And it's more so about trying to help her find family rather than, I don't know, something more about a connection that he has with her or something,
Yeah, totally. And I much prefer that rather than like, oh, there were, I mean, it'd be nice for him to find his daughter, but like, how convenient.
Yes, exactly.
And maybe that's the story they could tell, is he really does go looking for his daughter, and that's his arc. That would be awesome. But
like he finds his daughter in a book or something like that.
Yeah. So, but
is
yeah,
his daughter
I really like that.
Twi'lek?
Well, I know that's kind of the question, right? Because that was why a lot of us canon folk were like, no, that can't be, because she'd be half Twi'lek from Last Shot, right?
Because you gotta assume that novel set up Lando's wife and not Lando's girlfriend at the time.
No, that was pretty. I mean, if there was one thing I remember clearly from that novel, is that he was very much in a partnership and a really deep relationship with that woman.
That was Last Shot? Woman.
Last Shot by DJ Older. I can't for the life of me remember her name, because it's been a very long time since I've read that.
No, it's just one of those things. It's like if she were to pop up more in other canon, then maybe, but now it's just that it's a lookup name for sure.
Last Shot was a one shot. Cool.
That was good. I like that.
Thank you.
Final thing on the list, and this isn't even necessarily something that like. There's a lot of details throughout the book, but I thought it would be poignant because a lot of people have been saying, "What do you call that color?" Well, the novelization calls Rey's lightsaber white gold. That's the way it's referred to in the book. I have seen other books call lightsaber colors different things that aren't necessarily canon, but I liked the name white gold, and the way that Rey explains it in the book is how that's like her opposite of like the dark Rey or whatever, like the opposite of red. And I don't know, which was kind of weird because it implies that she chose the color, but I think what we know about this is when you turn on your lightsaber, the kyber is the color that you like choose without you being like, I want a green one. It's like who you are, who you want, you desire, what you are, as a person. So so it was interesting, but they call it white gold. Any thoughts on the color or the name?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too, because it's, when I saw it on the screen originally, I was like, oh, it's yellow, and but I think that kind of that brief little description that she gives there is cool because, we don't, a lot of times the colors of the kyber are not explained, and some are just kind of left like ambiguous. So it's nice that she really kind of specified what that meant to her as a character. And, I'm kind of thinking a little bit further down the road with High Republic too. There was a character on the cover of the Charles Soule novel, I believe, who had a similar color saber. So I wonder if, we'll learn a little bit more about why that color is what it is, or what, maybe that, because we've never really seen that before. Maybe that's something super rare to a, certain type of Force user or Jedi. So that intrigued me for sure.
I'm intrigued by the naming scheme a little bit because when I always referred to Mace Windu's lightsaber as purple, just like I think anybody does, right? It's a purple saber.
Me too.
And I was reading in Heir to the Jedi that Luke referred to it as amethyst. He said it says a wonderful or beautiful amethyst blade or something like that. It was described as amethyst. So from that point on, I said, oh, that's the official color name that they want to do. They call it amethyst. Then when I went to Galaxy's Edge to get my lightsaber, I knew I wanted to do that color. And I asked the person there, and he didn't even like hesitate for a second. He said violet.
Oh,
like it was like he knew the answer. And I said, that's interesting you said violet, because I wouldn't have thought that was the choices. I assumed it was either purple or amethyst. And he was like, no, violet, because, and then he went into this explanation that my brain was like firing. Like, so I don't really remember exactly what he was saying about why it was this specific color, but he gave a solid answer as it was violet. It was a violet blade. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I feel in some way that there's like a naming scheme to them, but again, like I said, another author called it amethyst long before Galaxy's Edge was a thing. Maybe this is just an author calling it white gold for now, but I like that name.
Yeah, I do too. And that's interesting about the violet, though. Like, it makes me wonder if there's more stories to come, behind that, or more of a backstory or history about what the colors represent. Yeah, it's very cool.
Well, cool.
So,
that is it. We have just ran down a ton of differences between the movie, The Rise of Skywalker, and the novelization. I said that again, differences. Not so much differences, expansions. Extra added things. So if you guys like the video, please, make sure to give it a like. Make sure to put a comment and talk to us about your favorite parts. Talk to us about things maybe we got wrong. The novelization is out today, so there's a good chance that if you're watching this as it came out, you probably haven't read it and you're just looking for the spoilers and the differences, which is fine. Let's have a chat there. If you do come to this video later after you've read the novelization, welcome. I hope we got everything right or saw it the same way you guys saw it. So any last tidbits before we take off?
No, yeah. I mean, if people reading, I'm sure there might be some other stuff in there that we missed. I think we got about 50 things, but there's always always room for error. So yeah, please let us know if we missed anything. And yes, thank you very much for watching, and happy reading, because this was a fun one to read. It was great to kind of revisit this story that I had a lot of initial problems with, but to kind of experience it from a different perspective. So it was good for me to kind of get that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right, well, we'll see you guys later. Make sure you subscribe to Star Wars Newsnet, and until the next book comes out, we'll see you then.
All right. See you guys. Thank you.